Let's take a look at the fantasy basketball waiver wire. Who is being added and dropped? Which ones are the right decisions? How do we view these players as we head into the final third of the season? Michael Bolton, can you help me speak?
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and one day I hope to have the self-confidence to cast myself in a role like Quentin Tarantino in Dusk Till Dawn. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. And you can find me on Blue Sky, joshloyd.bsky.social, on Twitter at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Also, check out lockedondaily.com and you will find the best newsletter for your favorite NBA team. That is lockedondaily.com. Head across there, subscribe, get it stuffed into your box 5 days a week. All right, it is International Polar Bear Day today, so shout out to Peter Lonzo and all other polar bears that you know. We're here to talk about the fantasy basketball waiver wire. Let's just start things off with the most added players over the last 48 hours using our data over at Basketball Monster. The number one player on that list is Olynyk. People are very much intrigued by what Olynyk is doing. He's had double-digit rebounds the last 2 games, stealing a block in there as well, 3 assists. It's not bad. It's not game-changing, I don't believe. But there is a lot of allure with Olynyk, obviously, because of, A, the hair. But number 2, the fact that he is... I did the thing. I said A and then 2 instead of A, B, or 1, 2. Oh, well. Mixing bulleted list points is our new thing, I'm guessing. Olynyk is starting, and again, it doesn't make a single part of sense. I'm not sure that is something that lasts all season. Remember, Olynyk's season... to begin the year, he didn't start on time because of back issues. When you are old and 7 foot and you are on a team that is bad, back stiffness, tightness, spasms is a very, 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 very convenient way to maybe sit games at some point. No problem with using Olynyk at the moment when the schedule works. He's doing enough. I wouldn't say he's doing enough to say, yeah, he's absolutely a must and you've got to hold through everything. But for now, I do get it. The next one is probably the more interesting player, or one of the more interesting players just across the landscape, and that is Kyle Filipowski in Utah. Last time we saw the Jazz play, Filipowski put up a huge game, and he's a player that I don't believe should have fallen as far as he did in the NBA draft. He had an incredibly interesting skill set. The problem in Utah is we just don't know when he's going to play 18 minutes or when he's going to play 30 minutes. Over the last week, despite playing just 23 minutes a night, he's averaging 13.3 points. He's averaging 2 threes with 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.3 steals, 61 from the field. He's a 101st ranked player, 105th in points leagues. That's all very good. He's not really rostered in many spots. He's up to 31% though on Basketball Monster's advanced number. But what happens? Kessler apparently is playing today now for the Jazz. Do they start Filipowski and Kessler together? Is it only when Kessler is out? Can he play in the Collins role? I don't know what they're going to do. You know at some point, he is going to play 30 minutes a night every single night. I just don't know when. 23 minutes a night, 100th ranked player, that's good enough for me. I think that is absolutely rosterable right now. If you're in the middle of your fantasy playoffs right at this point, that becomes tougher because you've got to make sure you're maximizing every move. But I think he might have pushed past that just because... yeah, there's going to be ups and downs. The totality of what he does is probably enough. And I think as we move further along, instead of your 30% starting, 70% bench, you're going to move to 50-50, then 60-40, then 70-30, eventually 100-0. I just don't know how long that's going to take. But the outlines of that are there for Filipowski. The next one we look at is Kris Dunn, who is also starting at the moment. He is not starting because Norman Powell is out. He is just starting irrespective of Norman Powell. And... yeah, the minutes in that are up, likely. He probably is more of a 28-minute guy versus a 32-minute guy. But there's no reason that he couldn't just play 32 minutes a night even when Norman Powell returns, because it's not like he takes the ball out of Powell's hands. He gets steals, he gets some assists, he rebounds okay-ish. He hits some threes okay-ish, he blocks some shots. I think Dunn is probably in that spot of like, let's grab him and let's hold and see what happens. I think that's where we're at with him. The next one on the list, the fourth most added player, is Milk Ty Jerome. I don't know what to say about Jerome. I still find it incredibly difficult for me to go, yeah, he's a 12-team league guy, the seventh player in that rotation who plays 20 minutes off the bench, and you're relying upon true shooting of 65% on 30 usage to get there. That seems incredibly unlikely, but it just keeps happening. Yeah, it has been helped with 3-4 extra minutes with Garland out, and the fact that in those games he's just gone, right, I'm taking every shot, and every one of them's going in. So it goes against my belief in long-term value to look at that and go, yeah, that seems real. But it is real because it is happening. I just don't think it will happen continually. But while it's happening, sure, go for it. I don't see how the long-term value could be there. But you never know. He's been awesome this season. The next one is Moses Moody, who is like totally fine. He is a stream level player. He is not someone you look at and go, yeah, we are holding this guy rest of season. At the moment, he is a fringe player at best. Kuminga is going to put a dent into what he does. I don't know whether Kuminga starts or not. I've got no idea. I don't think I'd be in category leagues. I don't think I'd rush to add Kuminga, to be honest. I think he's going to be relatively limited coming back from this ankle injury and then trying to have all the fits together. But Moody is just a stream guy, points and threes in my mind. And the last one there is Aaron Nesmith, which, again, people overreact to big scoring nights. And Nesmith's had a couple of big ones in a row. But he's in that grouping of guys where at any point, anything can go weird. Now, he's not a high usage player at all. He does require high volume, much like Ty Jerome. Not high volume, high efficiency numbers to get there. He is not going to get rebounds and assists in big numbers. He's not a bad out-of-position shot blocker. But to be a guy that we really look to and get excited about adding and holding, I don't think that that's what Aaron Nesmith is for us. The top 6 names on Yahoo. Number 1 on that list is Bol Bol. Yep, look, you just got to follow it with Bol. That's simple as it is. If Bol is starting, playing 30 minutes, and the easy ad, right? It's easy. If Bol moves back to the bench, because again, yesterday they lost in overtime by 3 points and he was a minus 24. So it is always easy to get a nab and go, well, look at the big stats he puts up. But as always, reality does play a part in our fantasy. Because if someone is bad, even if they put up numbers, but every time they're on the court, it screws everything else up, they will not play eventually. And that is what happened to Bol the first time. And I think it's going to happen to Bol again. But it doesn't matter. If you can get 3, 4, 5 games, or if he figures it out, or they figure it out, or they ignore it, you've got a great player there. But as soon as he goes back to 10 minutes, it follows to make sense that you wouldn't hold on to that. I'd be less likely to drop immediately now, given the fact how quickly they reverse course when there was literally no indication. It wasn't like we had Bol, man, he was so good in those 10 minutes, he's definitely going to get back to a role, because he wasn't. And he just jumped back up. So I don't think we need to be bashing ourselves about dropping him, because to me that was easily the correct move. But now he's an easy ad. Zaire Williams, the next most added player. Yeah, he's hit or miss, we know this. With guys out in Brooklyn, there's always opportunities, and that makes sense as single game, short-term streams, no problem. Bismack Biyombo, I would have added Biyombo yesterday to try and get the back-to-back in. They're also the only team with the weekend, Saturday, Sunday back-to-back, and Bassi remains out, and Mamukelashvili's not getting the minutes. Biyombo's upside is just nothing. There's no upside there whatsoever, but yeah, a 10-10 with 2 blocks on 60%. If that floats your boat, do it. All good. Andre Drummond, the next most added player. No Embiid, no Yabusele. Cool. Makes a little bit of sense. It could be a Dembona who gets those minutes easily. Drummond is officially washed. We know that. He's been bad basically all season, and even in opportunities, because he started the season as Embiid's replacement and then got usurped by Yabusele immediately. So I get people going to it. I don't know that I would. The next one is Jordy Clarkson. He is back. While he plays, sure, let's do it. There's no Sexton. He's going to start probably. He'll have a lot of shot opportunities, and then he'll sit out back-to-backs, and eventually his season will be over. You use him, you roll with it while it's happening, and then you move on. No problem. And the next most added player on Yahoo is Aaron Wiggins. Wiggo had a very good game yesterday. Again, he scored really well, so people get excited about that. And his numbers, they look solid. But again, much like with all of these sort of players, Wiggins, who is 93rd over the last week, He's at 21 usage, averaging 15 points. He's averaging 15 points because he's at 52 from the field and 90 from the line. He's at under 2 assists and under 3.5 boards. A steal and a block is useful, but it's just not reliable at all. Like, with him, Caruso, Joe, Wallace, there's too many guys. I feel like there's someone else I'm missing there, but whatever. There's too many guys that one guy can get hot, the other guy gets dropped, and then his minutes go down and the minutes go up. And last game was without Chet. I think it's a little reactive to go and add Wiggins on the back of that game. While he was very strong, and those numbers are fine, like 27 fantasy points over the last week is good. I'm not arguing with that. But if I'm looking at someone, and at this point of the year, what I want to be doing is I go, hey, is the guy I'm adding, there are two ways to do it. Is the guy I'm adding playing right now with a scheduled plus spot, either a back-to-back, a 3 and 4, whatever, to maximize my games played? Is that happening? Or is the guy that I'm adding a potential top 70 rest of season player? They're the only two sort of decisions I'm making. It's individual short-term streams, or is there a chance for this to be a nice long-term thing, which is what it is for Filipowski, for example, or even for Bol. But Wiggins isn't that guy. He's not a guy with that level upside. He's a guy that you can look at when the schedule makes sense. But that's it. That's the only way that I see that even close to panning out. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You know when an NBA game tips off, definitely right on time, but you know when it tips off, that doesn't mean it's the end of the action, because with FanDuel, you can get everything cracking with America's #1 sportsbook. Live bets in-game. If you miss the start, it doesn't matter. You can just check things at halftime. You can check it after the first quarter. You can check it in the fourth quarter. Individual lines and money lines straight up, spreads and individual team totals, all that stuff. You can just do it in-game, in that same game, and you can combine those live bets in-game into a same-game parlay as well to increase your bets or increase your odds on those bets. So right now, new FanDuel customers can also get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just go to FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. Okay. Let's go on to the next grouping of waiver wire guys we're going to talk about. We are going to go to Fantrax today because there's been some movement in their roster percentages. They use a 7-day tracking period. The #1 most added player on that team is the horse, Keldon Johnson. The Spurs do have a relatively positive schedule for this week. We've spoken about that many times, but we've also spoken about the folly that can be Keldon Johnson. And we saw that last game. Like, he was fine. He was fine, and he was a guy that when I'm trying to test out my streaming strategies, he was one of the guys that I looked at. I said, I'm going to add him the Tuesday, Wednesday back-to-back and let's see what happens. But what he is, he's a points guy. And he's not playing 30 minutes every night. He's not getting every usage touch in the world because Wemby is down. He's just going to remain the same sort of guy, the same guy that might get 15 points. Which, remember, if you're playing category leagues, 15 points a game is below average for a 12-team league. It's not an average contribution. I don't even think it's a median contribution. It looks good because it's double digits. But then he doesn't do any rebounds or assists, or steals are low and blocks are low. Blocks are infinitesimally low. And his percentages can be iffy, and his 3 volume's not huge. But he gets by because he scores. But he's one of those schedule type plays. At the moment, Zach Collins, former teammate of Keldon Johnson, is a little bit different. Because if Vooch is out, and he is, and Jalen Smith is out, and he is, well, Collins is just a guy you use and hold. And when I talk about, like, hey, can this guy give me top 70 numbers? In terms of, do I use it as a schedule player, as a top 70 player? If there's a chance of someone being a top 70 player for a week because someone's injured, that's good enough. That doesn't... I can look at it and go, well, could I maximize games and get 6 games out of that roster slot? Sure. But if the guy that I'm adding has a runway window, we don't know how long Vooch or Smith are out, has a runway there to give us 3 games of top 70 numbers, even if it's across 6 days, I think you go for that. And I'm not saying Zach Collins could necessarily be a top 60 guy. He could. But it's doable. It's not like, well, he might get 23 minutes a night, and there might be a game where he shoots 60% and everything pops off, which is how I view Keldon Johnson. And that's like schedule-based. But Collins might have a week's run of top 70, let's say top 75. Let's say top 80, whatever. Like that sort of range. And that's good enough. The next one we look at is more for the double on extras, more for the deeper leagues, because I'm going to talk about Killian Hayes. And while D'Angelo Russell is out, Killian Hayes is the Nets starting point guard. And one of the hardest things to find off the waiver wire, as a general rule, is assists. It's not steals. They're everywhere. And Killian does do that. Over the last week, Killian Hayes is playing 24 minutes a night. He's averaging 5 points a game and 0.3 threes. Now, he is bad at shooting. I know this. He's shooting 31% from the field. I do know that he can be much better than that from 3. But look at what else he's bringing. 6 assists, a block. There is only 0.7 steals there. If you're looking for assists and understanding that he might be bad, but he also might shoot 41% and get you 7, 4, 7, 2 steals. That can be useful if used appropriately. Is he any more than a schedule-based thing for slightly deeper leagues? Probably not. He's probably not any more than that. But he can't be a name that you discount. And he is 1% rostered on Yahoo. He doesn't even register on our Basketball Monster roster number, meaning every league, even the double Onyxes, take a little bit of a look at what Killian Hayes is up to. The next most added player on Fantrax is Fanapants Kevin Huerter. Don't get enamored by that last game where he started over Kobe White. He didn't start over Kobe White due to merit. He didn't start over Kobe White due to a long-term injury. He started over Kobe White because his finger started bleeding before the game. And then he started the second half because Lonzo Ball was out with a cut head. A lot of blood-based improvements in value for old blood nut Kevin Huerter. So is he a stream guy if I'm looking for some threes? Sure, no problem. But Tsumu could literally likely be back today, and he's going to have no value. So, absolutely not. Jose Alvarado. Yeah, that should have dented your confidence yesterday because he played 20 minutes. I'll give it like one more game because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me for them to run that rotation that way. But whatever. Are we going to get 28 minutes of Bruce Brown every night? I don't really know what Willie Green's playing at. But I also know that if I look at it objectively, Jose Alvarado is not that good. He's fine. He is adequate. He is a rotational level point guard who's a backup-ish guy who's a fan favorite type of a player. But I also understand that there are going to be games, and I talked about this yesterday, and people, I love when people disagree with this stuff. They do it all the time. Man, the NBA is way weaker than it used to be. They need to contract teams because of how bad teams are. It's just not true. You can just go back and look at some of how bad the bad teams were years ago. They were terrible. Anyway, but we talk about like the ability for coaches to go many different directions. And Alvarado's A, not a key piece of the future, and B, not good enough to demand those minutes every night. Now, I think he probably could push back up, but I don't like the trend of going from starting to the bench and then still having 30 bench minutes, but then going down to 20 minutes. That's terrible. So I just want to see. The next one there is Julian Bubbles Champagne, which I don't really get. I guess people added that in slightly deeper formats, looking at the Wembanyama injury, but that is just like, we've got to talking 16, 18 team league spots there. Let's go across to some of the most dropped players. We'll use the Basketball Monster stats for this one. Number one there is Bub Carrington. Yep, we have seen many, many times with Bub that even in roles where he gets more minutes, it doesn't always translate. He's a young rookie point guard who is not a high usage guy and struggles with efficiency, and now he's been benched, and now he's got to battle off the bench with Marcus Smart as well. We are not holding Bub Carrington. That's an easy drop. The next most dropped player is Keon Ellis, and I didn't think that I'd see that. I thought people might hold a little bit, but again, people can be reactive after he left the last game, or after playing, 8 minutes, I think it was. And he's back and he's ready to play today, but they still haven't shown any sort of idea that they're going to play him 29 minutes. 24 is not enough for Keon, and I get dropping him. The next most dropped player is Steph Castle. It's been an atrocious run over the last 3 games or so. He can obviously be much better than that, but his game is so not fully suited to fantasy. He can be an interesting points league guy at times, but he needs 28 minutes and he needs 30 plus usage. And he might get it, but he's not at the moment. I think for category leagues, he's not a good shooter from 3. His free throws are iffy. His 2-pointers are iffy. His assist rate is not high. He doesn't get any rebounds. He's not a high steals guy. He doesn't get blocks. He's just, drop him. Ben Simmons, yes, should never have been added in 12-team leagues at all. He's a desperation stream guy when the schedule makes sense, but that is it. Gershon Yabusele, I've talked about this for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, is that Yabusele, when Embiid plays, is useless. Yabusele, when Embiid is out, is a 50-50 proposition to be useful for fantasy. And now he is out. Now, I probably would hold for a game or two because I don't think that Embiid is playing rest of season. But that does not in any way guarantee what Yabusele is going to bring top 100 numbers. I think you put Yabusele in the Nick Richards, Jackson Hayes grouping of back-end centers. The old BDNR fan club grouping. That he's not like a top 70 guy. The next most dropped player is Cole Anthony. After a stinker the last game and then getting hurt, fine. Like, he's actually, believe he's questionable for their next game, which is a pretty interesting set of developments. But yeah, he's a guy that you stream in when it's working, and if there's any chance that he doesn't play, then you don't risk it. He's not good enough to take that risk. Today's episode is brought to you, though, also by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%, plus you also get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That is over 8x the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk, rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 per month for 1 year from the first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to robinhood.com/boost. Over 8x the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November the 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC is a member of SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Let's go through some of the most dropped players now on Yahoo, and we're going to start with the Dart, Goga Bitadze. Rightfully so, Goga's minutes are well down. This pattern was something we saw last season with the Magic. It happened again this season. Goga is a blocks, rebounds, stream guy at best. Don't worry about it. Absolutely drop him. The next most dropped player, Jusuf Nurkic. Yes, true. Now, they do play again on Thursday, the Hornets. Nurkic had started to look solid. He played 28 minutes the game before. He was getting 21 minutes as a backup. And if he was going to get 20 minutes and then get 28 minutes on back-to-backs when Mark Williams sits, then yeah, we're into that. And then yesterday he got DMP'd. Now, did he get DMP'd because it was a back-to-back, or is it a change that Moussa Diabate is back into that rotation? Are the Hornets just trying to find anything because they are literally playing the worst basketball of any team at any point ever in the NBA over the last 3 games? Maybe. But again, is Nurkic's value high enough to be considered an absolute must? No. So you get a DMP for, again, I don't know whether it was back-to-back. I don't know if it's a change of philosophy. I don't know if it's just Charles Lee going, what am I doing here? Let's try and figure something out. And he could be back playing 20 minutes in the next game. But you put him in the stream pool versus in a must-roster spot. Carlo Makovic, again, the Pelicans are going with the old trusted Pelicans legends in Kelly Olynyk and Bruce Brown. And Yves Missi's playing 25 minutes. If Carlo plays 26, we're in. But he's not, so don't worry about it. Move on. Tyus Jones, he's playing like 14 minutes a night. That's an easy drop. I did think it was coming to a degree, but not really at this level. And he might become better than this. The Suns, much like what the Pelicans are doing, or much like what so many of these, the Hornets are doing, they're just trying to find anything that works. And I don't know whether Jones will end up back in a larger role, but I also don't care to wait and find out. Easy drop. On Yahoo, people are dropping Max Christie. Now, Christie was a hot pickup about a week ago, and I get why they're dropping him, because the last few games have been pretty, uninspiring. Over the last week, Christie is now down outside the top 160 for category leagues. He's averaging under 20 fantasy points in that time. His roster rate is still pretty high, 96% on Basketball Monster, but 14 usage, 9 and 3 with 3 assists, shooting 44 and 100. Remember, the first few games when he came across to Dallas, he looked great because he shot about 60% from 3. But we know that as a community here and an audience and a loving group of Locked On Fantasy Basketball listeners / fantasy basketball players, that we know that if someone is doing their stuff and it's based on 60% shooting or 55% shooting or 50% shooting, it has zero chance of holding and it is going to crash and burn. We know this. The minutes are still okay for Christie, and he started and played big minutes, but he is probably, I would guess, more likely in that, Dallas has got a nice little spot here, a back-to-back, a 3 and 4, let's try him there, versus, man, he is the next star, we've got to hold for everything. Because unless you're rolling with good usage, and you're able to do little bits and pieces in other areas, and he's not able to do those things, that makes it incredibly tough to hold. The next most dropped player on Yahoo, it's Nick Smith. He's bad. He is going to get opportunities, but he is actually just really bad. He is going to shoot horribly. The Hornets have had this really good schedule period, which again, you can just blunt force, bulk volume the numbers in, but he's going to hurt you so much. I think his role is relatively safe as a starter, but that doesn't mean that it's relatively good. In fact, it's not relatively good. Now, normally at this part, after we've done the most drop players, I would come in and say, these are the must-roster guys, and I would say, these are the droppable guys. But again, we are here 6 weeks or so to go. Some of you 4 weeks, some of you 5, whatever it is. that I don't think that's an important thing. And when I looked at what's happening over the next 2 to 3 weeks, I didn't see any players who were sitting inside that top 100, top 90 zone who were just available everywhere. So I don't really think that there's a huge... Now, for your league, it'll be different because I don't know what your waiver wire is like. But I don't think I need to come out here. I don't think there's a bunch of must-roster guys who go, hey, why is everyone sleeping on this guy? I don't think that sort of exists at this point. It's all about hit the right player for 3-4 days, hit the right player for a day, and hit that sort of moment and try and take the upside swings on like a Bol. Like, is Bol a must-grab? Sure. But to me, that's different to a must-roster. That's like we see. Do I have confidence in it? No. But it's like we grab and we see, and I also didn't want to talk about Bol again. And same with droppable guys. Like, if someone's got a bad schedule and they're your 11th, 12th, 13th best player, you drop them because you get more value by getting, instead of 3 games out of them, by getting 7. That is easy mathematical equations. Let's talk, though, now about the last 7 days. Who are some top 100 players who are maybe worth our attention? Number 1 there is Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's been playing really well, but they just keep trotting out different sort of guys, whether it's Jalen Clark or it's Terrence Shannon. Last game it was Rob Dillingham. The other thing you're going to have is you're going to have DiVincenzo, you're going to have Randall, and you might have Gobert all returning in the next game. So while Alexander-Walker's been ranked 72nd over the last week, pretty solid, yeah, that's usable, that's streamable. I don't think we need to care too much about that. The next one is one that we do have to care about, sort of, and that's Richaun Holmes, the 78th ranked player over the last week. Holmes is, for some reason, starting in Washington despite being 32 years of age and just, I thought, being there as a tradable contract, which they didn't trade. Holmes is putting up strong numbers with Alex Sarr out. He is available everywhere at the moment, but he's 78th over this time frame. Like I said, he's averaging 10 and 7, which isn't super exciting, but 2 blocks, and 77 and 82 as his field goal and free throw percentage respectively. And that's what's carrying him. And those 2 blocks came from that one really huge block game. He doesn't normally do this. He also, those percentages are elite. He is not going to hold at 77 from the field. He is not going to hold at 82%. And again, it's worth, and I'll say these things over and over again. A, because I don't know who's listening to segments for the first time or hasn't tuned in or whatever. But also, I think repetition is important. If you add Richaun Holmes right now, you don't get these numbers. You don't get him being a 77 and 82% shooter. You don't get it. He did it, but you don't get it. You might get it, but you probably won't. Do you get 2 blocks a game? No, you don't. You might, you won't, but you might, but you won't. But you definitely don't get it. You don't get to add those stats to your thing. And if Alex Sarr returns in a game or 2, well, Holmes goes back and plays 18 minutes. So while he's interesting, he's useful. Again, if you looked and said, wow, top 80 over the last week, why have I not added this player? Well, the reason is those top 80 games have happened already. And while the past is important, it doesn't always prescribe the future. And when we're looking at what Holmes is doing, like I think you just take it on a game-by-game basis, but even on a game-by-game basis, the numbers there, the efficiency numbers, the block numbers, are not a real thing that he is going to do every night. Absolutely no worries with using him while Sarr is out, but he's not the solution to your problems. Dylan Brooks is inside the top 100 over that time frame. He was my second. Keldon Johnson was my Tuesday, Wednesday back-to-back target. My second target was Dylan Brooks. First game, great success. He's 98th over the last week. We know what Brooks is, though. He might have a top 70 run. He might have a top 200 run. One thing you know about Brooks, though, unlike with Holmes, is that you are going to lock in with a role. He's going to play 31 minutes. And there are people who think that Van Vliet's going to return and Brooks is going to go and play 25 off the bench. I don't think that'll happen, but I guess it is possible. Irrespective, Brooks is the same guy that he always is. He's part of TMC. He's part of the Matherin Collective, part of a group of wing/guard players that you can stream in when the schedule makes sense and you just hope to hit on a good one. That's what he is. Don't get fooled by that. Keon Johnson's 102nd, and honestly, I didn't think that Keon would be there. Remember, when I talk ranks, I'm talking weighted -1 category league ranks for head-to-head leagues. Now, for points leagues, again, you know the value of Keon. You can just look at your filter and say, what's he average over this time frame? His role is sort of secure. What changes with his role is usage. If D'Lo is in or out, if Cam Johnson is in or out, if Cam Thomas returns, Johnson's usage changes. He is like a better Nesmith in that he will take quite a few shots. They'll go in at a slightly higher rate, but there's always issues that it could just blow up in your face. He gets some assists, he gets some steals. I don't mind having him on a roster. I think he's totally fine as a back-endy guy, but honestly, if I have to squint really hard to think that he is anything more. Like, does he have top 80 upside? I don't think so. Like top 70, I don't think so, which to me puts him in that, okay, we use it, we try it, and then we get somebody else in when the schedule makes more sense. Zach Ricochet is 104th. George Niang is 108th. both of those guys, along with Caruso, have been like up and down. And I find it hard to think that all three of those guys are going to put up good numbers at the same time. Richaun was terrible in the last game. He was awesome the game before that. What I always want to see is, does he play just 30 minutes a night? That is what we want to see. Now, they've got a bad schedule this week. They don't play on the weekend, and they play Wednesday, and the next game is on a 10-game Friday. I don't mind if you've got the ability and you're not in the playoffs, or the playoffs aren't starting right now. I don't mind holding Richaun. I'd probably do it over Niang, because again, we're just talking about, hey, he should be improving as the season goes on. They should be investing some stuff into him, and hopefully we get him playing 30. But if he goes and plays 23 in today's game, I have no business thinking that's going to be worthwhile holding. If he gets back to 28, then I'm a bit more interested in it. So we'll see which direction that goes. And Niang is just a stream guy, absolutely not a must-roster player at this stage. I've got 6 other names that I want to talk about. And this name is being brought up a lot to me. People are saying, well, do we just go and add Mitchell Robinson? No, I don't think so. And I know that Tom Thibodeau said we're going to get our starting centre back, right? I know he said that. So people are just clamoring onto that. Well, they're going to move Towns to the 4 and Robinson will start. Even if that is true, which seems crazy, because you know what that would mean? It would mean that Josh Hart plays off the bench. It would mean that OG Anunoby plays off the bench, or Mikal Bridges plays off the bench. And I find that incredibly hard to believe that would happen. That doesn't seem realistic at all. Because Brunson's starting and Towns is starting. And if Robinson's their starting centre, then one of Bridges, Anunoby, or Hart comes off the bench. Again, seems absolutely impossibly unlikely. Robinson also hasn't played in 11 months. And he's had multiple surgeries on his ankle. And then when he plays, he's not that good anyway. He needs 27, 28, 29 minutes to be useful in fantasy outside of a desperation, deep league, blocks and field goal percentage streamer. He is coming back off an ankle surgery that has cost him 9 months of action, however long it is. So adding him now, I think, is incredibly foolish. I don't think that it makes any sense. I think that it clogs up your IL slot. And when he comes in, what is he going to do? 5 and 6 with a block? It's not useful. I don't think you should be doing that. The next player that I think is worth talking about is Mr. Black. Anthony Black has an opportunity with no Suggs. With Cole Anthony dealing with this knee issue, Black is probably going to have to start. And if we look over the last week, he's 156th in category leagues and 162nd in points, averaging 21 points. He's 6% rostered. He's available everywhere, 20 usage. 9 and 5 with 1.8 assists as a point guard is pretty atrocious. The reason he's able to get these numbers, the reason he's able to be even close to this is this. He's averaging right on the nose of a 1-1. 1 3, 1 steal, and 1 block. He's hitting 78 from the line in 20 minutes a game. And maybe that plays to 28 minutes. Maybe that bumps up if those guys are out. But he is incredibly inconsistent. He's a steals and blocks sort of a player who gets more rebounds than assists usually. And the scoring is just not reliable at all. But again, could he play 30 minutes? Could he play 32 minutes because everybody else is out? I think there's a possibility in that. Although Wagner and Banchero will play a lot of point guard minutes as well. So I put Anthony Black on this list. Like, I would much rather try an Anthony Black than Mitchell Robinson, just because maybe we get 1, 2, 3 games of 30 plus minutes. And back to the Killian Hayes discussion, like finding that sort of a player, even though Black's assists aren't like what Hayes's are, I think that it is worth mentioning, considering, maybe trying, but my confidence in it is pretty low. 4 more names. Trendon Watford is playing really well, and today you're going to have Day'Ron Sharpe most likely starting, and Claxton is out, and Clowney is out. And Watford's playing 21, 22 minutes a night. It is going to get crowded when Clowney eventually returns, but for now, Watford is at least on our radars and in that sort of streamy list. Moussa Diabate, I'll put him there, because if he plays as Mark Williams' backup from now on, and I don't know that they'll do that. And then if he starts the games that Williams sits, then he gets more interesting. Now, again, I will state this. I don't think Diabate is a huge prospect for this team. I don't think he's a long-term starter in the NBA at all. People seem to think that he's this young, unfounded guy. I think he's older than Mark Williams, honestly. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but he's not. Like, he's a low offense, defensive and strong rebounder, but solid defensive player. Like, he's fine. And if he was splitting minutes between being a bench player and a starter, he's not as good as Jusuf Nurkic per minute. So he's a name we watch. If they decide at some point that Mark Williams just isn't playing at all, and Diabate is a 29-minute starter, then yeah, sure, we absolutely roster him. But I'm not sure he's worth a stash waiting for that. We don't even know he's going to play every night. Lonzo Ball's on this list because my projections keep liking him as a back-end guy. It's not because he scores, because he doesn't. And for points leagues, you can largely just ignore him. But what he can do is bring you the assists and steals and a sneaky block. But he's been shooting so terribly. He has been playing pretty good minutes. And I don't mind him as an ad. I'm not going to say that he's a must because he isn't. But I think there's going to be some little bits of value here for him. And then the next one is Alex Caruso, who is playing like a top 100, top 90 guy. Points leagues, no. He's in the same Lonzo category. But for category leagues, yeah, he might score 5 points, but 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks is something that if Caruso does, you'll go, yeah, that makes sense. That's a regular thing. And that's incredibly valuable. I'm not saying that we got to consider Caruso a must roster, but he's definitely a lot closer to the guy that I thought he was in draft season, where I was completely off on him. He's definitely a lot closer to that now than he has been at any point through the first 18 weeks of the season. So he's back in that, maybe we can get there with him. Maybe. What we can do now is we can get to the end of the show, because that is the Waiver Wire show. We're back with a Thursday streaming preview show coming up as well, and of course the recap show later on today. Hit the thumb and leave your comments down below on the video, and keep your team smart, make correct decisions, understand where you're at in your season and what sort of focus you need to be making on that. And if you make a move and drop somebody and it turns out to be wrong, just move on to the next one. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.